I'm Trip Lane of Winnetka, and I'm a 12-time melanoma survivor.
My name is David Vermeulen, and I'm a melanoma survivor.
It didn't mean much to me up until about 21 years ago, when I got my first diagnosis. I was in my mid-30s, and I had a mole on my neck that, it wasn't melanoma, but I had been nicking it shaving at that point for 20 plus years, and I wanted to get it off. And I didn't know, we lived down by Wrigley Field at the time. I didn't know any storefront dermatologists in the Wrigley area, so I went down Northwestern, figuring they have a, dermatologist. Well, they have a whole dermatology department. In fact, they have dermatological oncology, which I got to know immediately because the doctor took one look at me and said, yeah, I'll take care of that thing on your neck, but take off your shirt. And as soon as I did, he said, keep going. And that's when I found my first melanoma on my back. So this mole really saved my life, even though I'd just been nicking it shaving. I started going every 6 months from then on. And after I got a couple more, I'm down to every 3 months. So I'm part of a special clinic at Northwestern. My guy, Padram Garami, specializes in melanoma, and in fact has been doing a genetic study in conjunction with Harvard for the past 7 or 8 years on melanoma, and in particular the gene that I have, as does my son Christopher, who also has now been diagnosed with melanoma as of about 1.5 years ago. And it's called the BAP1 gene, and it creates atypical melanomas. So they're not sun-induced, although they can be exacerbated by sun. They're genetic in nature. And they're atypical in that they're not the classic mole. They're not raised, misshapen, multicolored moles. It could be a red dot or a flesh-colored bump. So I go every 3 months to get checked. I check myself. My wife checks me. I joined Skin of Steel so that I can help others. So melanoma to me now is just a part of my, not everyday life, but overall life.
My diagnosis of melanoma was stage 3, that I ended up having a tumor on my inside of my upper thigh, of my left leg, and ended up getting into my lymph nodes. It hasn't impacted me until 4 years ago when I got diagnosed with melanoma, and it changed my life drastically. Had to go through surgery, and I was on a clinical trial and being checked out, and it's made me rethink on how I live and how I look at life moving forward. I have learned that life can change in a heartbeat. Life is fragile. You have to learn to enjoy what you have, and that cancer is a very scary thing. It's definitely made me enjoy and look at what I have right now and take advantage of it, because I thought I was kind of invincible in a lot of ways, and I never thought I would ever have cancer. So it definitely changed how I looked at it, and I was about 6 months away from, if I did not go into the doctor, being in a different stage of life right now, for sure.
Well, the first one on my back was before they even knew about BAP1. So I don't know whether that was a BAP1 related one or a sun related one, because I've had both. Excuse me. But once I had that initial diagnosis, they had me coming back on a regular basis, and that time shortened down to 3 months, and I'm up to 12 melanomas at this point. At my first diagnosis, when I got out of the doctor's office, I went back to the, excuse me, I'm getting over a cough. I went back to the car in the parking garage. I'm like, shit, I got cancer. At that point, Christopher was like 2 years old, not even 2 years old. I got to go home and tell my wife that I've got cancer. It was very scary. And so I took a minute in the car and then got ready to go, and I turned on the radio, and the Beatles were playing, and the song was Obla Dee. And I have always gravitated to the Beatles. I like the Beatles, and this song in particular made a big difference to me because the lyric is Obla Dee, Obla Da, life goes on. I said, I want that. So ever since then, Obla Dee has become my mantra. You know, if I get another melanoma diagnosis, Obla Dee. You know, if my daughter tells me, you know, those pants make me look fat, Obla Dee.
The hardest stage was when I went back in after they took out my lymph nodes and my tumor. And the doctor told me that I had a 60% chance of reoccurrence in the next 5 years. That's when it set in that this is serious and scary and I got to do something.
I had one about 13 years ago that metastasized from my chest to my lymph nodes. And that was truly scary. You know, they gave me about a 40% chance of survival. And so I immediately went and got a couple second opinions. You know, everyone says Sloan Kettering is the cancer, you know, institution that everyone should go to. But I went to MD Anderson in Houston and Dana-Farber in Boston for my second opinions because they specialize in melanoma. And they concurred with what my doctors at Northwestern said, which was get a lymphectomy, cut out the lymph nodes to which it had spread, and then do chemotherapy, which in my case was interferon. And interferon's an immunotherapy that, when taken, it basically causes your body to feel like it's got the flu every night. And in doing so, the body reacts by revving up its immune system to fight what it perceives as the flu, when in fact the goal is to fight any cancer cells that the surgery didn't get. So the interferon beat the hell out of me. It was supposed to be a 4-week course, and it turned into 7 because my body didn't take well to it, and I had to take a break a few times. And I have some lasting side effects, but it's certainly worth the trade-off.
What helped you overcome this stage?
Honestly, mostly time. I was still drinking, so that didn't really, you know, the effects of my sobriety had yet to kick in, so it was really just riding it out and waiting to make sure it didn't metastasize further. And, you know, time heals all wounds, and it certainly did with this.
Were you involved in any clinical trials or like new procedures?
No. My melanomas, once I had one, a lot of the clinical trials required, you know, newly diagnosed patients. So I didn't qualify for most clinical trials.
How can people around us learn from your story?
How and what? Basically, just check yourself and go to a dermatologist, because a lot of people go to their regular family physician, you know, their GP, their pediatrician if they're kids, their internists if they're adults, but those doctors are not qualified, you know, to find melanoma. Truly, it's got to be a dermatologist, and honestly, there's dermatologists that wouldn't be able to detect BAP1 related melanomas that I get. But mine's a rarity. Luckily, not too many people have BAP1, but go to a dermatologist and stay out of the sun and wear sunblock. Simple stuff.
I think I've stayed the same person. I don't think it's changed me from a standpoint of who I am. I think they can learn from my story, like, you know, when you have something that doesn't feel right, don't hesitate. Get to the doctor. Let them figure it out. Let them look at it. Let them tell you it's nothing, as opposed to what happened to me. So hopefully people can take that and learn from that. the chance of reoccurrence with melanoma is very high, especially when it's gotten into your lymph nodes. I think that's the hardest part. And always having that out there that, might reoccur.
I've come to handle my melanoma a lot differently now than I did in the past. I used to be freaked out by it. I lived my life in fear and terror. And at this point, I live it with concern and worry, not fear and terror. So I've dialed things back. Part of it too, I didn't handle my melanoma very well. I used to drink over it. I mean, I didn't drink because I had melanoma. I drank because I was an alcoholic. I've been sober a few years now. But the way I deal with it now is I'm at peace with it because my attitude is everything I can do within my control, I do. I go to the doctor every 3 months. I check myself, my wife checks me, and I join Skin of Steel, as I said. Beyond that, it's out of my control. And if it's out of my control, I don't have to worry about it. I just let it go.
Has it changed your point of view of life?
Yeah. I certainly have a greater appreciation for life. I don't take things for granted the way I used to. And clearly, being in recovery has helped as well. I've become more spiritual. And to me, spirituality, I have to keep things simple because otherwise I'll overthink things. So to me, spirituality is connection. If I'm connected, either to someone else or nature or my feelings, whatever it is, if I'm connected, I'm spiritual. And if I'm spiritual, I'm out of my own head and I'm not freaking out. So it's improved my spirituality.
I was involved in a clinical trial. I ended up getting on a clinical trial through the University of Chicago. Dr. Luke and Dr. Jayeski, they did, I was fortunate enough to be a part of 60 people nationwide, and I think there were either 3 or 4 of us in Chicago. It was a vaccine that had markers, so it basically went through my body and looked for microscopic melanoma cells and had my immune system attack it and kill it. On top of getting that vaccine, I ended up getting another drug on top of it, which was geared toward enhancing my immune system and pumping it up. And it was a clinical trial just to see how my immune system would, or how our immune system would react. And they ended up getting it to the next step with the federal government. So I think they're in testing with about 500 people now to see if it actually will work. But I was very fortunate. Well, no, I'm super glad I chose a clinical trial. I mean, every advantage I can get to keep melanoma out of my body is phenomenal, even though it was very hard. When they actually injected me with the vaccine, I had 4 injections. That was over a 4-month period where I got 13 shots a week, or 13 shots a month. One of the shots happened to be the actual vaccine, and when they gave me that vaccine, it was extremely difficult. It had a very adverse effect on my body, but I'm super glad I did it.
Stay out of the midday sun, from 11 to 1:30. If you have a choice, don't be outside because that's when the sun's at its greatest. But even if you are, wear hats, wear sunblock, and reapply the sunblock. The rule of thumb is whatever the SPF is, that's how many minutes each application works. So if you have a 55, do it every hour or so. If you have an 80, you got closer to an hour and a half. But the reapplication is really the key to making sure sunblock works. And like I said, also make sure that you go to a doctor. I mean, kids don't necessarily have to as much, but adults, if you're 25, you've been in the sun a quarter century. If you're 50, you've been there a half a century. Go to a derm.
With being at University of Chicago and talking to Dr. Jayeski and Dr. Luke, it seems like a lot of things happen when you're at a young age. So my advice is to parents to really push their kids to cover up and have sunscreen and really take heed of the sun, and especially at a young age, because it sounds like a lot of your melanoma is formed when you're young. So that would be my advice.